Putin's latest warning: a dangerous escalation. As the war in Ukraine drags on, with casualties mounting and international tensions rising, Russian President Vladimir Putin has issued a stark warning that has reverberated across the globe. The crux of his message: a direct threat to NATO. According to Putin, any Ukrainian use of Western-supplied long-range missiles to strike Russian territory would constitute direct involvement of NATO countries in the conflict. An escalation he claimed would bring NATO and Russia into open war. This ominous declaration came amid Ukraine's pleas for long-range missiles, such as the US-made ATACMS and British Storm Shadows. Ukrainian officials, under pressure from constant Russian bombardment, have argued that these advanced weapons are necessary to shift the tide of war in their favor, allowing them to hit Russian supply lines and military installations deep within Russia. While Ukraine has received substantial military support from the West, there has been a notable hesitation from NATO and the US to provide such long-range systems out of fear of triggering a wider conflict. The Russian stance. Speaking to Russian state television, Putin was resolute. He declared that should Ukraine be given permission to fire these missiles into Russia, it would fundamentally change the nature of the conflict. This will be their direct participation, and this, of course, will significantly change the very essence, the very nature of the conflict, Putin warned. His message was clear. Any attack on Russian soil by Western-made long-range missiles would not be seen as a mere extension of the war in Ukraine, but as a declaration of war by NATO itself. This assertion comes at a time when the US and European nations are walking a delicate line balancing the need to support Ukraine's defense while avoiding a full-scale confrontation with Russia. For NATO, a direct war with Russia could have catastrophic global consequences, potentially drawing in multiple countries and escalating to levels not seen since World War II. NATO's response, and the Western dilemma. Western leaders have been measured in their response to Putin's threat. Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the UK's Labour Party, who was in the United States for discussions with President Joe Biden, reiterated that the UK was not seeking conflict with Russia. Ukraine is allowed to defend itself against a war started by Russia, he said, emphasizing that supporting Ukraine does not equate to engaging in an offensive war against Russia. Yet, the dilemma remains. Western countries want to provide Ukraine with the means to defend itself and potentially reclaim lost territory. But they are acutely aware of the risk that comes with providing weapons capable of hitting deep within Russia. President Biden, in particular, has been cautious. While the US has supplied Ukraine with substantial military aid, it has limited the range and firepower of missiles that Ukraine can use, hoping to avoid an escalation that could draw NATO into a direct conflict. The risk of escalation? Putin's warning represents a significant escalation in rhetoric, marking a turning point in how Russia perceives the involvement of NATO countries in the conflict. Until now, Moscow has consistently labeled Western military aid to Ukraine as provocative, but stopped short of calling it a direct act of war. However, this latest statement suggests that any attack on Russian territory with NATO-supplied weaponry would be viewed as an attack from NATO itself. The situation now poses a critical question. How far is the West willing to go in its support of Ukraine? Will NATO provide the long-range missiles Kyiv desperately wants, knowing full well the risks involved? Or will they continue to offer more limited support, trying to balance aiding Ukraine while keeping the war contained within Ukrainian borders? The road ahead. Putin's latest warning has placed the world at a dangerous crossroads. The conflict, already the largest in Europe since World War II, could spiral into something far more destructive if cooler heads do not prevail. While Ukraine continues to plead for the military support it needs to defend its sovereignty, NATO is left grappling with how best to assist without igniting a larger war. The future of the Ukraine war is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the stakes have never been higher. Conclusion. As the war intensifies, the decisions made in the coming weeks and months by NATO, Ukraine, and Russia will shape not just the future of Eastern Europe, but the world. Putin's threat to NATO marks a new phase in the conflict, one where the risk of global escalation looms larger than ever. Will diplomacy and strategy prevail, or will the world be drawn into a broader war? Only time will tell.